if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will.
But you can program your mindset first thing every day for positivity. You can do the workouts. You can eat all the right food. You can get all the sleep, but you need this deep sense of meaning and purpose in your life. I basically found, Dhru, as you know, my background's in fitness, and it's like movement's always come pretty easy for me. It's part of who I was as an athlete. But then the meditation piece was something I found that if you stack it at the end of a workout, right, you've got all this, you kind of shock the system with movement. It kind of loosens things up. Think of like a kid with a temper tantrum. Then it's easier to still the mind and to dive into a meditation. And so I keep it really basic, really simple. There's 4 parts. And so I would encourage anyone out there to try this as soon as you get finished with a workout. It could be a trail run, it could be a CrossFit class, it could be one of my workouts. But as soon as you get finished with your workout, try this brief 4-part meditation. It takes just a couple minutes and you will feel amazing afterwards. So should we dive into it?
Yeah, dive into it. Let's do it.
All right, so we're going to break it down into 4 parts. So the first part is just a moment of gratitude, right? You got an opportunity to just be thankful for this day. You got a chance to move your body, a roof over your head, food to eat. This crazy year that we've had, that even during these crazy times, we can find things to be grateful for. And it sets us up to just be in a happier place for the rest of the day. So that's the first part. So really make it personal, something you're thankful for. And then the second part we dive in is lifting up a loved one. Right? Imagine a glowing light hovering over a child, a family member, maybe someone who's sick or going through a tough time. Just seeing a big smile come across their face, just pour blessings upon them. Just something we're so interconnected, Dhru, that that we can actually help uplift someone else and be connected to them is something that's so powerful. And just pour blessings to understand that this life is more important than just us. It's not always about Todd and Dhru, right? So just taking a few moments to lift up and pour blessings upon someone else. And the third part is for really all of us in this business space of entrepreneurs is visualizing success today. What does it look like? What does it feel like? So this morning I did my meditation and I just saw, what I want this podcast to be about, helping people, seeing them take this Mind Right meditation to improve their lives. So what does success look like today for everyone out there listening? It could be as simple as a walk with your kid. It could be going to soccer practice. It could be an important sales meeting you have. What does success look like? But more importantly, step into that feeling and have that moment now. So that's the third phase. And then once you're done with that, we shift into just being present, being still. I go back to a Bible verse, Psalms 46:10. Says, be still and know that I am God. And, I always used to wake up in the morning praying, as an early Christian, but I was kind of just talking to God. And what I found is that when you meditate, you're actually creating this space for God. And there's a profound difference. And so it's, there's nothing special about yoga poses or nothing special about my meditation. It's just all about how do you figure out a way to still the mind. And what I found is that when you do that movement first, there's nothing special about that. But it helps us still the mind. And that's where the fourth part, we drop into that stillness. And that is a game changer, my friend.
Man, there's so much to unpack there, which lays out the philosophy and your approach to life. And I also just want to acknowledge you because, I have different, my relationship to spirituality, or let's say God or the universe, is different than your own. But I always appreciate how you are true to where you come from. And you're one of my closest friends. And I think this is a reminder for everybody who's listening, regardless of what path they come from, is that, good people are good people. And then they all have their own individual, unique relationship to a higher source. And for some people, that might not be a relationship to a higher source, and that's okay too. And I think in this day and age where we want to see somebody who has different beliefs as us as the other, we have to remind ourselves that the vast majority of people on earth, regardless of their approach to any topic, political, religion, dietary, whatever it might be, good people are in the majority. And when we can use gratitude to connect and hear them and honor their traditions and their background and sort of applaud them for appreciating their lineage and heritage, that is how the world is a better place. We don't see, it's not that we don't see the differences, it's that we're not using those differences as a reason to ostracize or excommunicate the other. And on the flip side, bad people, which there are bad people on earth. And sometimes those bad people have had bad things happen to them, right? So I feel for them. I have compassion for them. A lot of them have had trauma, have gone through very difficult things. You know, it's not like they were born bad. Those people are in the minority. And if all the good people can work together, support each other, get each other healthy, lift each other up, that is how we freaking change the consciousness of the world. So just wanted to toss that in while also throwing some gratitudes to you, my friend.
No, man, I think you hit it spot on. There's so much there as well. It's in the sense of there's like, 7.4 billion people on the planet. The idea that I have it all figured out, like I would never begin to think that. But, after a decade, Dhru, and you've been in the wellness space for a while, I started off from my journey as like, you got to sweat every day, right? Like that's like the most important. Then I was like, oh crap, you really got to eat healthy and eat real whole food. Then, you have to, sleep 7+ hours a day. That's really important. And then now after a decade of being in this, like there's also a huge part, which I'm super excited about in the wellness conversation, is we're seeing that you need to have a deep sense of purpose and meaning in your life. You can eat all the right food. You can do all the burpees you want. You can even meditate. But if you don't have a deep sense of purpose in your life, I think you're missing out. And I think for me, this Mind Right Daily meditation allows me and allows our community to ground and connect to a deeper sense of meaning and purpose. And that translates to how you and I interact as friends, how we interact with our employees and our coworkers. It affects everything about us because it's at a soul level. Now, for me, I would never begin to think to tell people how to find that or what that looks like for them. I can just share my journey and my experience and what that's meant to me and how it's led me to this moment, and just encourage people that whatever that looks like for them is, I think that, we call this getting your mind right every day, right, with TMAC Fitness. And we say that move your body and connect to your spiritual practice before you look at your phone, before you check your email. So it helps program you for that positivity, that moment of gratitude, that moment of connection and grounding, so you can carry your best into the world. And whatever outside stimulus comes, we can filter that in a positive way, right? So we were talking about the negative people out there, right? They seem like they're everywhere on social media, but in the real world, they're very few, far in between. We can filter that in a positive mindset. But if we wake up looking at our phones, looking at social media, we stimulate ourselves. We're programming ourselves for stress, whether we realize it or not. So I think for me, the movement, the Mind Right meditation just helps me start my day in a positive mindset. And then that radiates and carries forward to everyone we interact with.
I've shared this quote a few times on the podcast recently. My friend, Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, interviewed a gentleman, and I believe his name is Gregory McCown. And he has a quote, and the quote says, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. When we wake up early in the morning and we go right to the news, right to social media, which is another version of the news, right? It ends up sort of being that way. You end up doing something that another mutual friend of ours, Light Watkins, he calls it Insta meditation. People always tell him, I don't have time for meditation. He's like, well, you're doing an Insta meditation every day. You open your phone, and whether it's Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or whatever, you're just scrolling around. And now whoever you're following and what their priorities are and whatever they're sensationalized by, because it tends to be the most sensational stuff is what spreads according to the algorithm, right? The most extreme stuff is what spreads. That becomes your priority. So really, Todd, what you're doing and what you do with your TMAC platform, TMAC Fitness platform, is you are reminding people that if we do not prioritize ourselves in movement, in wellness, which includes sleep, eating well, and then the mind right component, somebody else's priorities will become our priorities. And now you are essentially a victim. There's so many victims that are out there in the world because they're letting somebody else's narrative control their life in terms of what they like, what they don't like, who they're upset about, what they believe, instead of thinking for themselves.
It's 100% spot on. Like I said, you control your mindset. That's the one thing that we have control over. And we've somehow forgotten that, I think, and we need to get back to that. And so hopefully this practice of movement and mindfulness will help us bring us all together for sure.
Well, I want to get to origin stories in a minute, but just want to tease out some of those steps that you mentioned, because even though those are 4 simple steps and most of us have heard of them, I feel it's the sequence that matters, right? It's kind of like when you go to a functional medicine doctor. A big part of their approach is, yes, we know that maybe for a period of time, cutting out gluten and dairy or certain supplements could be beneficial, or maybe some therapeutics or IVs. But what makes them an expert is knowing, first of all, what do you get the biggest bang for the buck for, and what sequence do you do them in? So this mind right component lives within this sequence. As I've seen you practice it from the outside and people going through your platform online, it lives within the sequence of first shocking the system. And I want to talk about that a little bit. There's a lot of people that have tried meditation, but they haven't figured out the movement piece, and how movement, not for everybody, but for a lot of people, we are under moved. We are missing movement as nutrition. Movement is nutrition. Just like food is nutrition, movement is nutrition. And a lot of people are under moved if we look back at our hunter-gatherer ancestors. When did you realize that when you sort of work out and you shock the system, that your mind is a little bit quieter? Because that is a game changer for people who have never heard that before. So talk about that and how that became part of your methodology.
Yeah. So a little bit of the history with it as well, right? I came to know Jesus Christ at 12 years old, and I used to wake up in the morning and would get on so the first two steps of it came from my kind of prayers of early Christian, where I would just kind of wake up in the morning, get on my knees and be like, God, be with me today, be with my family, pour blessings upon them. All well-meaning, but I was kind of honestly half-assing it. I wasn't awake, right? I was just kind of going through a routine.
You weren't present.
I wasn't present. And then it wasn't until I started learning a little bit about yoga. You do Shavasana at the end of class. I was like, all right, this is kind of interesting. And then my injuries from football really came to where I couldn't even go to yoga. I couldn't do a push-up. I couldn't jog. And so I would go sit in the cold ocean, right? And this is something that, Wim Hof has made really popular now, but I didn't know about him at the time. I'd go sit in the cold ocean and, be about 55 degrees during the winter in California and Santa Monica. And I would just sit in the freezing cold. And it's essentially just kind of like a workout, right? You're shocking the system, like all this blood flow is flowing through the body. And then I would sit there and just talk to God on the beach and just be shivering cold. And I found that intense pain, that intense shocking, allowed me to be more present. And so I was like, all right, well, why can't we use movement to do the same thing? So we do these HIIT workouts to kind of shock the system, so to speak, like the cold ocean does. And then it allows us to get out, like I mentioned earlier in the beginning, like you have a kid who has this temper tantrum. Like you got to let the kid get that out of them, and then you can talk to them. Then they can listen. But right now I feel like we have this idea of meditation, like you have to float on some cloud and sing Kumbaya. And the rest of us, our minds are too busy. We have too much anxiety, too much stress in us, whether we realize it or not. So if we can exert all that out with just a little bit of movement first, it helps us slow down the mindset. And so that's kind of where the first two parts came about, was that blending of what I knew as my prayer as like an early Christian that was routine, and then kind of heightened it with diving into shocking the system first.
Let's go to gratitude, because we know, and we've done a few episodes on this, is that our brain evolved. We really have three brains. We kind of have three operating systems.
Well, and you're teaching me now if we have three brains. Okay, go for it.
We have one brain that has different evolutionary parts. And, people usually know of the kind of the two brains that we talk about. We talk a lot about the prefrontal cortex, which is our executive function, a lot of what has made us human beings, our ability to reason and be compassionate or see things. It's more than just fight or flight. And that fight or flight brain, which we often call the amygdala, the lizard brain, that is our evolutionary brain that we share with a lot of animals that are out there, that is really worried on, fight, flight, mate, and freeze, right? And eat. Those are the kind of key things. Now, that brain has, just from a simplicity standpoint, because I've interviewed experts that are way more qualified to talk about this, that brain has a negativity bias. Because when we were living out in the woods or the plains or wherever we all came from originally, we had to be aware of any threat that was there. It actually did not pay to be an optimist. You actually had to be a pessimist, because being a pessimist kept you alive. And that is baked into our brain still. And in our modern life, we don't always know how to turn that off. So we don't even know that it's happening. And so scientists call this our negativity bias. Everybody knows this, that if you are somebody who is a creative or you're putting out content on social media, you could have 100 people say positive things towards you, but one person who you don't know and have no connection to comes in and says, you don't look that great, or that dress looks ugly, or you know what, I thought you'd be more athletic than you are. And our mind tends to focus on that, right? And gratitude is, I see it as a practice of, you are just like we work out our muscles and you teach people about that. I see gratitude as a workout for our mind, because our normal state is negativity bias. And we actually have to train our mind out of that and use a different part of our brain. I want you to sort of expand on that a little bit. Have you seen with the clients that are on your website, or even yourself personally, how do you see about the relationship of gratitude and the negativity bias, or anything else you want to toss in that conversation?
Yeah. So, and to kind of elaborate further what you're saying, to help the listeners get an idea of what you were just talking about, right? Let's say all of us are going on a hike right now. Me, Dhru, those listening right now, we go on a hike. If you were to see a butterfly, you're like, oh, that's cool to see a butterfly. Or you see a rattlesnake. What are you going to go tell people about the rest of the day? You saw a damn rattlesnake, right? You forget about the beautiful butterfly, right? That's that kind of negativity bias that kept us alive that you're talking about. And with today's, current environment with social media, news, politics, etc., that is so easy to infiltrate and dominate our mind for the whole day. And like you said, it's like, to me, this mindset is like working this muscle of the mind of gratitude. And we have to be intentional about creating that during the day. And I'll give you a recent example, Dhru. So when we saw each other in Austin recently, right? Like before that, I've been up since 4 a.m. that day. I went to the Austin airport. I had like 4 flight delays, didn't make my flight. I was trying to go home to see my family. We had things planned, etc. It could totally ruin the whole day. And I'm looking at the airport at everyone around. And I used to be the same way. Don't get me wrong. I was really frustrated as well. People were freaking out. And I was pretty calm. Like I was able to, all right, what can I do today? All right, I can get some work done while we're waiting on this flight, waiting on this mechanic. I've got to say, I can go see my friend Dhru in Austin. He's in town. And ended up spending the next day doing the same thing at the airport. Had like 4 flight cancels. So I spent 2 days at the Austin airport, basically. And look, it wasn't ideal. It wasn't what I wanted, but I was peaceful. I was happy. I was able to focus on things I could control. And that's because my mindset, I woke up both of those mornings, did my TMAC 20 workout, my mind right meditation. I programmed my mind for positivity. And so that's just how an everyday example, we do not, for those listening right now, maybe you're having a great day, maybe you're having a shitty day. You don't know what's ahead of you, but you can program your mindset first thing every day for positivity. And just like I always say, if you're trying to get stronger in squats, right? You got to train your glutes. You got to consistently train your glutes. The mind is the same way, and gratitude is the same exact way. You have to consistently program it for that and work that muscle to be happy.
Yeah, it's well said. The interesting thing about the morning, and why this works so well in the morning, and why, if you don't do it, how we are subjective to other people's priorities, as I was talking about earlier, our brains are very vulnerable right when we wake up in the morning, because we're kind of getting oriented. Everybody knows this, right? You're waking up early in the morning. You're kind of getting oriented. You're sort of warming up, so to speak, your body. And also right at night, right before we go to sleep. In fact, the Buddhists would call, right before, they would call sleep of mini death, because there is this thing, and a lot of people notice this with their minds, especially if they haven't been practicing meditation, if they're not working out and exerting the body, that right before bed, your mind will start worrying about all the problems that are there, right? Because it feels vulnerable, and that's the ego starting to worry about, this is wrong and that's wrong, and I'm about to go to sleep and I'm not going to be able to pay attention to it. So there's a power to doing this practice first thing in the morning, when our default neural network, which sees the world in a very specific way, is still kind of booting up like the operating system. And this takes me right into, one of the next components, which is visioning, setting a vision and imagining what success looks like. You're an athlete is your background. You played college football, right? You had dreams of wanting to maybe be in the NFL one day. You have been very honest in your story that you got injured, and that kind of had you reevaluate which direction you wanted to go in. But you always maintained, and still today you maintain, that athlete's mindset. And visioning is a big part of, you will probably not find a pro sports team that's out there that is not using some practice of visioning. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, this really exciting part for me with, athletes and, even police in these days, like people that are in super high stress environments that have to perform almost to perfection, right? And super stressful situations. And this is, for those that are into college football fans, little backstories. I played football at University of Florida, and my sophomore year, we were playing University of South Carolina, and Lou Holtz was a coach at the time. And you study film during the week, you break down film, et cetera. And, the night before you're in the hotel, you kind of play the game, so to speak, in your head, right? But you're also like 19 years old, you're texting your girlfriend, you're doing all this stuff. But for whatever reason, I kept seeing this one play in short yardage situation that Coach Holtz liked to run. And for whatever reason, it's fourth quarter, 4th and 1, game's on the line. There's 93,000 people screaming in the stands. And so it's hard for people to imagine what that feels like, but 93,000 people and you're in this bowl, the ground is shaking, right? Like I could be me to you this close and you don't hear anything. All of a sudden they come out in this formation I'd seen and kind of played and visualized the week ahead. And everything went still, Dhru. Everything went absolutely. You could hear a pin drop. I could see the blades of grass in front of me. I could see the finger, like the blood vessel, like as the tight end kind of leaned on his 4 fingers. I saw the pupils of the fullback, and I knew what was happening before it happened. Ball was snapped. I jumped through the line of scrimmage, hit the ball carrying the backfield. Crowd goes wild. We win the game. We come into meetings the next day. My linebacker coach was like, I had no idea how the hell you knew that was going to happen, but I totally took credit for it. Great job. How did you know that was going to happen? I was like, I saw it happen before it happened. And I didn't really know how to articulate it at the time, but I had visualized that play the night before in the hotel room. And so I've been able to take that with me now as an entrepreneur. It's like, what does success look like today? How do I step into that moment? What is that moment of 93,000 people screaming and yelling? Can I step into that moment now? And that to me is just such a powerful thing for all of us in the entrepreneurial space, is that there's so many peaks and valleys, right? There's good months, there's good quarters, there's bad quarters, and being able to stay positive in that mindset. And so that's really where that third part comes in, is that, you pull a little bit from your Christian background, you pull a little bit from your sports background, you pull a little bit from yoga. And that's how that 4-part meditation kind of came about.
What I love about visioning is also too, it's another version of sometimes the priorities of society, whether they're implicit or explicit, end up becoming beliefs that we think we want, but we don't actually maybe really want. A perfect example is the idea of, if somebody is an entrepreneur, or even if you have a regular 9-to-5 job, or somebody staying at home, we're all familiar with the idea of keeping up with the Joneses, right? You live in a neighborhood, you start seeing everybody around you maybe upgrading their cars, upgrading their houses, maybe buying fancy jewelry. And then if you don't question it, you may think that that's the natural step for you. Now, there's nothing wrong with those material possessions. There's nothing wrong with wanting to enjoy a nice car. But often when we don't question it, we're driven towards those things thinking that they will actually make us happier. Just the same way, social media version of that, right? The social media version of having a fancy car is all of a sudden just having more followers just because you want more followers, right? Not focusing on necessarily that we want to make a difference, want to make an impact. So visioning is so powerful because it helps us separate what is our own beliefs and our own wants, and what do we actually really care about, and what was just something that we inherited. It could have been the voice of a parent who said, you're never going to be successful, right? I had a friend of mine who said that his dad said, a real sign of success is when you have that Amex Platinum card. And so his whole life growing up, he thought like, great, what are all the things that I need to do to get to that place where I have that? And it's like, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Unless if you actually think. I got a question for you in this
Yep.
rant that I'm on.
Go
Have
for it.
there been things in your journey that you thought, just because you grew up with that belief, and it may not have been a bad belief, could have been from society, your parents, just the general, community. Was there something that you thought that you wanted that was going to make you happy, and then through your own journey of faith and spirituality, you realize that actually, no, I don't want this thing anymore?
Absolutely. There's probably a few that come to mind. The first one that comes to mind is, so after playing football at Florida, I became a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch. I always joke, say I'm probably the only personal trainer I know with a Series 7. And I come from a rural environment. My dad was a police officer. My mom was a teacher. And I never had to worry about money. Like, it was always had a roof over my head and food to eat. But I got a chance to go to this private school to go play football in high school. It was an amazing private school. And I saw what real wealth looked like. And I was like, well, I'm going to college. I was like, well, I don't want to be broke. That's for damn sure. I don't want to work at the local mill. That's some hard work. And so I was like, all right, well, success, once I get done playing, whenever that looks like I want to make six figures. That was like my number. I just want to make six figures, whatever that looks like. And so I knew someone who had that private school that, they made great money. They played a lot of golf, looked like a successful, happy life. I didn't know a damn thing about the stock market, Dhru. Not the first fucking thing, right? Like, I didn't grow up looking at the Wall Street Journal. We looked at like the local newspaper who killed the biggest whitetail buck, right? Or who caught the biggest bass that weekend. That was kind of the newspaper we read. And all of a sudden now I find myself working, I'm in a suit and tie at Merrill Lynch. And there's this huge golf tournament there in Northeast, in Jacksonville, in Ponte Vedra, called the TPC. It's a big professional golf tournament. And so, it's a huge deal in Jacksonville, and all these people are there, and the mutual fund people are taking out all this financial advisors, Ruth Chris dinners, nice steaks, nice scotch. Everyone's in their suit and ties. And I've got one of our best buds, right? Is like people that really are in finance for the right reasons, that want to help people. And I just looked around. I was just like, this isn't me. This is not my idea of happiness. And I don't know what that looks like. But, I drove an old pickup truck, and everyone in the parking lot had Porsches and, Jaguars. And I was coming out in this suit and I have an old pickup truck, and just, it didn't feel right. And so that was one of those moments to me. It was just like, all right, well, money's not the answer. I didn't know what was going to fulfill me at the time, but I knew money wasn't the answer. And what I didn't realize is I was just happened to be wired that I don't mind working hard, but it has to be something I believe in, a higher mission, a higher purpose. And football was that for me for the first half of my life. And I had to kind of go on this journey to discover what I was willing to dedicate the rest of my life to, Dhru. And then I found that through creating this platform that, I always say that even though it started as personal training, like, it had a clear mission statement. It was to assist in creating a culture that's conscious of the body and the world in which we live in. And that's been the mission from TMAC Fitness since 2009. And it's navigated over the years through personal training to this online platform. But yeah, that helped me find meaning and purpose in life, was using the gifts God's given me to be of service to my fellow brothers and sisters. And that money, don't get me wrong, I want to make a shit ton of money. I haven't lost the drive to be able to provide for a family and do those things. But I realized that was not the source of happiness.
Yeah, totally. And, for anybody who's listening, of course, there's a lot of studies that are out there that once you hit a particular threshold, money doesn't matter anymore. But if you're below that threshold and you're just struggling to put food on the table, you definitely, money will solve your money problems. So if you can't put food on the table, if you're struggling to pay the bills or get health insurance or other things, obviously money is going to be a crucial factor and can improve the quality of life. That's
anyone that says it's not important has never been broke.
Exactly. There's a to quote Kanye West, there's a lyric in one of his songs, not having money's not everything, not having it is, right? When there's no money, all you can think about it is money.
Yeah.
When you have at least enough of it that's there, then that's if you have the right vision for what you want to create in life and how you want to use money as a tool, then you can pay attention to everything else that you love and just use money for leverage to spend more time with family, to have maybe a little bit more space, to eat healthy, all the beautiful things. that are part of that. You know, inside of that, I wanted to tell you a story and kind of ask you a question. I had a mentor of mine. He passed away a few years ago. His name was Gurudev Chitrabhanuji, and Gurudev just means teacher, right? It's not like he was some, like nowadays, guru is usually associated with like an omniscient person who's telling everybody what to do. There's been a lot of gurus that have gotten, themselves caught up in all sorts of random scandals and stuff. But this guy was through and through a really incredible gentleman. He actually became well known because he was part of Gandhi's movement in India to bring freedom through nonviolent action, right? This term that we use in India called ahimsa. And Gurudev Chitrabhanuji was from the Jain tradition. It's less of a religion and it's more of a way of life, right? Practicing ahimsa, nonviolence. So in that period of working with, Gandhi, he decided, because he was a monk at the time, he was a monk in the Jain tradition. He said, you know what? I don't want to just be a monk in India. I want to take these teachings that are here that we are learning, like yoga, and I want to bring them to the world. So at the same time, he got an invitation from Harvard Divinity School to come out to America. This is in the 60s. And they were hearing about this thing called yoga and seeing people in India doing breathing exercises. And they invited him here. And as crazy as it sounds, there was a rule in the Jain community, even though they were all about nonviolence and sort of acceptance and other things, they didn't want their monks traveling overseas because they felt that they would get corrupted, right? That they were traditionally vegetarian. So they said, you can't go to America because then you're going to start eating meat. You're going to start having temptation of there's going to be women around, there's other stuff, there's alcohol, whatever it might be. So the society actually turned on him. And when he went and left for the airport, they were throwing stones at him. I mean, these people that were, again, this just shows you, regardless of what tribe or group that's out there, whatever they believe and preach, it comes down to how you actually treating another human being. And he said, I still need to go. I need to go to,
good for him.
I need to go and I need to take these teachings. And he really brought yoga to the Harvard Divinity School and started teaching people there. And he was one of many other teachers that started coming to America and started teaching it. And that's had all sorts of implications, and made yoga more accessible and people can make their own version of yoga. I would love if you could tell your story of how you got into yoga, and especially from a Christian background, maybe even some of the concerns that you had yourself or concerns from other people around you who were saying like, what is this guy doing?
Yeah. And so to pick up on where you left off real quick about your teacher friend, your mentor, so to speak, I would say that what he did was very much Christ-like. One of the reasons I always loved reading, if you read the Gospels, Christ was, he ate and drank with the sinners. He hung out with the tax collectors, the prostitutes. Like he hung out with people in society that people were like, don't be around them. And Christ interacted with them. Just to me, that's the beauty of what your teacher did is like, you should be able, don't get me wrong, like I think you can put yourself around positive, uplifting people, but you can't sit around and I don't think and go, meditate in some Buddhist monastery necessarily and not interact with society. Like if you have these gifts and you have this divine being inside you, you should be able to go share that with other people. And so I just want to applaud to, your teacher who passed away. Like what he did was very much what Christ did, was to take that divine presence and to be a blessing to those who are hurting in the world. We always have this idea that like, those of us who go to church every day or, pray every day, somehow that we are the good ones and everyone else is the bad ones. And to me, I think it's just completely opposite of what Christ has taught me, is that these gifts and this blessings of Christ being in you is to go share that with everyone, not just people who believe like you believe. And I think that's the ultimate test of our faith is how do we interact with people who think different, believe different? Can we still show them love and compassion? We can still stand for what we believe, but if you can't show people love and compassion who disagree with you, then I would say that your faith is quite honestly bullshit, to be honest. I think that's where I would go with that, or just isn't very strong. And so where I can remember going back to, so Christianity and yoga. I can remember I came to yoga class for two reasons. One, there was a hot girl wearing Lululemon pants that invited me to a yoga class, if I'm being completely honest. And two, I had 5 surgeries from football, so I couldn't lift weights and run anymore. So I was looking for a way to heal my body. And I remember going to Vinny Marino's class on Main Street in Santa Monica. Shout out to the one and only Vinny. And all of a sudden, like, there was this like Buddha statue in there. There's people started like, doing some weird ass sounds. I was like, holy shit, is this like sacrilegious? Like that was my initial feeling, right? Like I came here because it was a hot chick, but now I'm like, holy shit, am I doing something like wrong? And I got to know the community and got to see that, like, for example, at the end of every yoga class, they always say namaste, the light within me sees and honors the light within you. You start to understand the meaning behind this. And I did my yoga training, and you read, I believe it's the Yoga Sutras by Patyana. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. It's very much just like the book of Proverbs by King Solomon. And there's so much intertwined in that. And I think that sometimes we have this idea that because I believe this or I was taught this way, and this is, I think, one of the things that I differ with a lot of my Christian brothers and sisters, is that it's very, hey, I'm right, you're wrong, so to speak. Like, I love you, but I'm right, you're wrong. I've never really bought into that a whole lot. I think there has to be a lot of humility that when we're trying to conceptualize the creator of this amazing universe. That's why you hear me talk about, like, hey, come surf with me. Like, I'm not a good surfer, but just sitting on a surfboard at sunrise, looking at the vast Pacific Ocean, it helps put you in the place that you're just in the presence of something so much bigger than yourself that it's very grounding.
It's beautifully said. And there's so many themes inside of there. And I think on that theme of, Christ, or whether we're talking about as an example and a parallel, that mentor of mine that I had, Gurudev Chitrabanerjee, it's another reminder for all of us that, why do we eat well? Why do we take care of ourselves and sleep well? Why do we try to get our mind right? We do these things so that we can give love and attention to everything that matters in our lives. Now, in the traditional, in Greek philosophy and sort of the Stoicism, and also in sort of the Indian tradition, that first means, and a lot of actually traditions, is you got to take care of your own household, right? You got to take care of your own household. You got to make sure that you can provide for them, that everybody's there. And these deep family ties, having a sense of relationship, because we have to look out for one another. It's so hard to be out there in the world, even in our modern day and age, from a mental health standpoint, people who don't have strong family ties. And by the way, family doesn't have to be blood family. It could be community. But we need community. We needed community to survive, but now we actually need it to thrive. Depression is going up. Anxiety is going up. We need people around us. We can't just do it on our own. So once you take care of your household and you look after people and lift them up and be there for them in the best way that you can, and let's say you have enough money, maybe you don't have plenty to do all the extra things that you want to do, but you have enough to put food on the table, take care of stuff, feel like you have dignity in life, which is why I'm so pro entrepreneurship and why I know you're so pro entrepreneurship, because that is part of the way that you get control and create that dignity for yourself in your life, if that's a path that you want to pursue. Then the next component is you start asking questions. Think Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yep. You start asking questions of, why am I here? What do I want to do? Right? How do I want to make the world a little bit of a better place in this unique sliver that I can see? Your background, your upbringing, maybe your race, your culture, your things that you've seen, your gender. My fiance, who you know very well, she's always felt from a young age, because she's heard so many great stories from her dad of how women who are in control of their finances, whether it's through their job or can create companies, are much more in control of their life destiny. Then if they're in an abusive relationship with a man, they don't have to stay in, because they have the ability, to go. So her entire mission is around getting women and supporting them on the journey of seeing more women entrepreneurs that are out there. That's a beautiful mission. And I think for anybody who's listening here, we have to zoom out and say, as much as we're struggling sometimes to figure out the right diet for us or trying to sleep a little bit better, and we don't feel like we're putting as much attention into it. This goes back to the hashtag mind right, which is actually, you may not be dialing into these things, and it's not about being perfect. It's about dialing into them for you and your personal journey, because you don't have that sense of purpose. What is your why, and why are you here? And I love the fact that that's weaved into everything that you do and you talk about.
Yeah, and this kind of brings us full circle from the beginning of the conversation, right? It was like, after a decade of helping people reach their fitness goals, that's just kind of what I've learned, is that you can do the workouts, you can eat all the right food, you can get all the sleep, but you need this deep sense of meaning and purpose in your life. And for me, my work is about giving people the tools to move and connect each day. And whatever that connection looks like is totally up to them. But it is extremely important. What you talked about is giving that sense of meaning and purpose to your life.
What do you do when you have a challenging week or a project's not working out, and you feel like your connection is to that purpose? You still know intellectually it's there, but you feel like that connection isn't as strong. What does TMAC do on a human level? How do you navigate that?
So let me make sure I understand it. So something you've been working on that you feel is aligned with your purpose, but it's not working out. Is that the question you're asking?
Yeah, you maybe feel like you're not making as much traction as you want to.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a setback that's there. How do you handle, and how do you get yourself back to being focused when you feel that, at least in the short term, life's goals and events that you're making progress on aren't happening the way that you want them to?
So two things, the way I approach it is, one is the immediate short term, and then the second is the long term. The immediate short term, again, which is, I think, is so much about the meditation, is learning to be present, like in this moment. For example, I just got back from visiting my family, and I was a little frustrated. Like, we don't have Wi-Fi. I can't get all my work done that I need to get done. But what can I do in that moment? And I got a chance with my niece. Like, I'm trying to work out. She's jumping all over me. But I had a moment with my niece where we just got to sit there and play. And I got to see her smile. I didn't get in my workout like I wanted. I wasn't able to get off, as much work that day or before that, but I was able to have a moment there. Just that ability of being present. And I think kids have a way of doing this, or reminding us, right? This is, can you be present in that moment? Like, let's say you have a partner later, like you and Yasmin are there, and you may have had a shitty day, Dhru, but you have a moment there with you where you're actually in her presence and she's in your presence for that day. And that's a beautiful thing. I think that we have this, this entrepreneurs thing, like we were going to go change the world, right? I think we need those bold missions, but ultimately it's the everyday in the moment. Like, going back to the airport story, right? When I'm in Austin. I've been in the airport now for 2 days, and I see the lady working up there at the front desk, and the line is all the way down the hallway of people that are just pissed off, angry. Their flights have been canceled, rightfully so. And this poor woman, God knows how stressful it is. Who knows what she's got going on in her personal life? She may have kids. She may be, who knows? And just going to her and just saying, "Hey, how are you? I know this is a tough time for you. Like, thank you. I know this is tough. Whatever you can do to help." And just in that moment, like, yes, things may not be great for you right now, but you can still put positivity into someone else's life by being just present and acknowledging them in that moment. And I think that often our minds, this is where the meditation comes in, is that we're so worried about down the road. And don't get me wrong, I think big term planning is important, but we forget that in that moment, like that cash register, who's checking out your groceries, can you call them by first name? Right? They usually have their name tag. Can you call them by first name and say, "Thank you, John. Thank you." Like, they never get that. So I think that's the short term, right? Is, can I find those moments of being absolute present and acknowledge how beautiful that present moment is, because that's all we have. We may get hit by a car later today, right? We have no idea, like that present moment. And the second term, or it's like, all right, let's say I have a bad quarter, right? Or a bad year. This is why, to me, it's the long-term mission of what I'm doing. I'll be doing some form of wellness, of helping people move and connect for the rest of my life. Like, I'm clear on that mission, right? Like, TMAC Fitness has gravitated from personal training to online fitness. A decade from now, Dhru, like, we may be on a different platform talking, we may be doing different things, but the long-term vision, this is what I'm committed my life to. And so I'm happy to pivot if it's switching strategies or, living in a smaller house, driving, modify my lifestyle. Like, these are things I'm happy to do. May not be comfortable in the moment because I'm committed to the long-term journey, that this is the gifts that I've been given, and I'm going to continue to work on that craft and learn, but ultimately to share and help with people. And whatever that looks like down the road, we'll have to see how that unfolds.
It reminds me of a quote from a friend of mine, Reverend Michael Beckwith from the Agape Center in Los Angeles. And he says, people all wrapped up in themselves makes for a mighty small package. And I think what I'm hearing from you is that when you're connected to your why, your larger why, which is also about making a difference for other people, you're not so wrapped up in your own world and your own problems. So you have a tough day, you can do this gratitude, you can do these workouts, and you can get a chance to reset and say, why am I really here? It's not just about me, right? It's not just about me. It's about these other individuals that I want to also get a chance to make a difference for. And that's my why. That's my driver. That keeps me going. And the question is, for anybody who's listening that's working on an audacious project, and audacious is all relative, are you committed to making that impact, or are you committed to something else? So if you're committed to making that impact, right, and that can pivot, we can change our minds and we can have different versions of what that impact looks like, then, okay, it doesn't matter if it's 5 years, if it's 10 years, if it's 15 years, if that thing that you ultimately want to do for the world and also for yourself, because it's both for the world, it's selfless, but it's also selfish, and it should be, that thing will, you know that if you just keep on working on it, you're going to make progress. And there's a sense of surrender that's in that, right? There's a sense of surrender and joy that comes from it, that no matter how bad things are in this moment right now, I'm committed to making the world a better place. I'm committing to putting this project out. I'm committing to making an impact in this nonprofit, or supporting my kids with whatever goal it is. And whatever I'm going to, this too shall pass, right? This too shall pass.
Right. And I think it's something we often have to be careful of as entrepreneurs, right? Again, we got this grand vision, but if this grand vision, even if for good purposes, if you're an asshole to the person bagging your groceries, you're missing the whole point. You truly are missing the whole point. And I think it's just something we have to be reminded of. And I think that too, being, there's obviously that reminder and check in the moment, like again, at the airport on my third flight getting canceled, of coming back to your breath and being mindful. But honestly, at that point, if you're waiting for it, you're just too late. You have to program your mind, I think, first thing, and you have to be consistent. Like, this has taken years for me to develop this mindset. Don't get me wrong, I still have my shortcomings and bad days. And I think that we have to acknowledge those, but I was already prepared before that moment happened. Does that make sense? And so you can't just wait for the shit to hit the fan in your personal relationship or your work or whatever it may be. And we're like, all right, well, now all of a sudden I'm going to be happy. It doesn't work that way. Like, it's a muscle, just like everything. If you were to go run against someone who runs every day, you're like, oh, I'm going to be mentally tough today, but you haven't trained, bullshit. You're going to get your ass kicked. I don't care how mentally tough you are. If you haven't trained for that moment, you're going to get your ass kicked. Same way with gratitude. Like, you have to consistently work that muscle.
Oh, it's so true. And it changes your perspective. It makes me think that a lot of people are secretly waiting for an eviction notice in their life, not on their house, but just in something. It could be you go to your doctor's office for the routine physical and they tell you that your arteries are clogged or that you're developing breast cancer. Now, my hope is that that isn't you, but sometimes people are waiting because they feel stuck in life, that, you know what, maybe something bad will finally get me to pop out and actually have something to stand for. And okay, you could wait for the universe or God to kind of kick you in the butt, but why not take that opportunity to kick yourself in the butt right now? Because that is ultimately a better driver, and you can make a difference in your life and others before it, sometimes it is too late. Sometimes it is too late to tell somebody that you love them or that they meant something to you because they might have passed away. Sometimes it is as long as you're breathing, you still have a shot, but sometimes it's tougher to start or write that book or to do that thing that you wanted to do. So it's all about how can you kick yourself in the butt right now and practice these tiny little things that build up these great habits long term. So I want to pivot here. We started with the mind right component, but just wanted you to get a chance to be able to talk a little bit about the platform you've built and how it really started off with these simple workouts for individuals who were busy in their life. So just wanted you to have an opportunity to chat about how you ended up creating TMAC Fitness and the catalyst, in addition to your story of how it evolved into what it is.
Yeah, and there was again, kind of like all of it, right? It's like pulling a little bit from everything, right? So I was training people in LA, and typically you work out with your trainer maybe 3 days a week or et cetera. And then the other days that people were just sitting on their ass, right? Like a lot of my clients were bi-coastal, they were traveling a lot, they had families, they had kids, they were running businesses. And I was trying to get them to do something on those other days. And they're like, Todd, this is all the time I have. I give to you 3 days a week. And I just knew that you need to move your body every day, right? It doesn't have to be hard every day, but I needed something for them to move every day. And so I started creating these 20-minute workouts for them to do on the days we didn't train, right? And so I merged it with what I knew as an athlete, we took HIIT training, right? Which is basically high intensity interval training, which is the shortest, most effective bang for your buck, so to speak, when it comes to training, right? And then I merged that what I knew with yoga, right? To help lengthen the body, help stabilize all the muscles, to help protect your lower back, rotator cuff muscles, et cetera, to prevent injuries. And then we added that meditation at the end. And so essentially it was kind of like to help my personal clients one-on-one. And then that eventually, they started sharing, I started putting videos on I put them on YouTube for free, just put them up there for my clients to use. And they started sharing it with their friends. And so I was like, all right, well, there's something there to this. And that eventually led to a subscription business, et cetera. And now we've got people, from the US to the UK, around the world waking up every morning, doing their 20-minute workouts and getting their mind right.
I love it. And you also have an element of community and group challenges. And I'm a big fan of community. And I think it's when we don't often feel motivated by ourselves individually, we get ourselves in the right community. And then we get, that extra little push. We can always go further together, right? You might go faster alone. That's sort of old saying, but you can go further together. So talk about these group challenges and the community component that you have.
Yeah. And so much of it is based around behavioral change, right? So we take people on these 20-day challenges a couple times a year, right? And it starts off, right, as like getting clear on your why. Literally on day, you get 20 days of 20-minute workouts, right? HIIT workouts, they all end in meditation and prayer, right? You get a meal plan, but we also do have a daily mind right challenge. This is what I love, right? And so day one, kind of to sum up what we talked about in the beginning, is why are you doing this? What is the number one goal that you want to get this? You want to lose 10 pounds? Great. Why do you want to lose 10 pounds? Is it want to improve your sex life with your partner? Is it to be healthier so you can have more energy to play with your kids? Getting really clear on the why, because you're going to want to quit at some point, and you need to be clear on that why to give you that extra motivation. The second part, right, is this is where the accountability comes into the group and behavioral change. Is you basically find an accountability partner each day of the 20-day challenge. You check in with them every single day, right? So if Dhru's not feeling like getting his workout today, I'm texting him, hey, bro, let's get in our workout, right? So that community support to help with the behavioral change. And the third part, again, I always say it's important, is just finding a program that meets you where you are right now. So the workouts, we have kick-ass advanced workouts, but I also noticed that a lot of people hadn't moved in a while. So I got 2 amazing trainers, and we developed a whole beginner platform. So now, regardless, like Dhru, we've got people that are our parents' age to people that are fit like you and I, all moving and connecting to their spiritual practice for 20 days. And it's such a beautiful thing. And at the end of the 20 days, Dhru, you'd like this, is we have them decide on how they can volunteer 1 hour a week in their local community. And that's the Mind Right Challenge on day 20, right? And again, a lot of people are like, hey, I came here to lose 10 pounds. I lost 10 pounds in 20 days, which is amazing. But now I'm also going to mentor a kid in my local community. And that goes back to that deeper sense of purpose, that deeper sense of why. And again, that's, for me, I think that why we're all here is to help our brothers and sisters.
I love that component. And in this day and age, it's almost like when people have very extreme political views, one of the first questions I want to ask them, besides what are you grateful for? Okay, great. You might have opinions about other people's lives,
Yeah.
how they should live, what they should do. Again, on both sides of the spectrum. But first, tell me what you're grateful for so that I know that you actually have the ability to be grateful for something, right? Then let's talk about something else. And the next follow-up question, if I could ask people, would be, what the fuck have you done for people in your community? Before you talk about anything else, let me just know what you've done in your local community to make the lives better of any group that you care about. Any group, whether it's a faith-based, whether it's disenfranchised youth, whether it's whatever. I just want to know, before I hear all your opinions of how things should be, that there's an element of you that can see gratitude and that can actually make a difference, or is making a difference in the lives of the people, because that just goes back to the victim mentality. Other people are controlling our world and we can't do anything. And if the politicians could finally, or the corporations could finally figure it out, then our lives would be better. No, we got to figure it out. We got to step up and we got to make a difference.
It's the whole, start within your home and then work out from there into your local community. 100% agree with you.
Is there any person that was doing, was there anything unique that you saw that people were doing, or a standout story from somebody that you had in your group of something that they did, maybe something meaningful that you want to share with our audience for how they decided to do or spend that 1 or 2 hours in their local community?
So a couple that come to mind let's see here. A couple that come to mind there was a girl, and I forgot the country that she was in, but she decided to give blood to her local community. So on her way of being of service was that she went and gave blood in her local community, something that she didn't want to do, she never would have had them, she didn't really want to be around needles or do those things. And it was a big move for her that she went and she gave blood to her local community. And again, I think it's that small act, right? It doesn't sound like a huge one, but for this individual, that was a huge moment for her. Was that she took time out of her work day. She went to a blood bank, or whatever they're calling, and she gave blood. A simple act. She may not know who that's going to affect, how it's going to positively affect someone else's life, but that came to mind to me just recently, with off the cuff, was I thought that was special, because this is someone that, again, we talk about all these big changes in the world. Like, if this side got their stuff together, or if this side believed what I believe. No, it's what are you doing today that's going to make a positive impact? Again, smiling at the person bagging their groceries, going to give blood. These are the little things that I think that has that ripple effect that change the world.
It's a beautiful reminder, because you never know how that might come back and pay dividends to you as well too, right? Like, you're not present to these small things, looking after individuals who might be going through, homelessness, giving blood, whatever it is, that small act. It reminds me of, I recently heard an interview with Sebastian Junger, who has written a lot of books on sort of the military and tribes and brotherhood, and how when people leave the military, there's a deep sense of loss of purpose. And he was kind of writing about that in his books, Tribe. And he had a story recently where he was at home and something happened and he started bleeding out. And by the time that he got to the hospital, he lost about all the blood that he could have lost. And he was only a few minutes away from dying.
Wow.
And having that experience, when he left and the doctors and, modern medicine was able to save him, he left and he said, one of the first things that I'm going to do on a regular basis, I'm going to give blood, because I was alive because of what the work is that other people did. So sometimes we're not as present to things until we push ourselves to that place to ask, even thinking about our own lives, what's somebody or someone that made a difference for us? Who's somebody that did something for us, no matter how big or small? How can I keep that legacy alive? If it was that fourth grade teacher that finally got you into reading, okay, there's plenty of opportunities to volunteer and get involved and start reading to other kids, right?
And so I'm much more like, I say by nature, Dhru, I'm a selfish person, right? I think a lot of this, like in the entrepreneur space, sometimes we have that it's easy for me to be all about me, right? And so again, part of these challenges where I have to build in. So on Fridays, during the challenge, we call it Thank You Card Fridays. based on what you just talked about. And so every day on Fridays during the 20-day challenges, you have to write a thank you card to someone who's made a positive impact on your life. It could be that third grade teacher. It could be that mentor. It could be a friend going through a hard time. But for me, taking the time, like on my calendar today, on Friday, like I list 5 things to do every day, right? Like this podcast is like number 2. Workout was number 1. This is number 2. Got a podcast later, number 3. Number 4 is another TMAC assignment. Number 5 today is to write a thank you card to someone that made a positive impact on my life. And I think that we have all these ideas. People are listening to this podcast. It feels good, etc. Don't be afraid to build it in your calendar, moments of gratitude.
And even if you've never written a card before, you would think like on a very small level, like sometimes my friends are like, I don't even have stamps, or I don't have this or that. It's like, okay, how about a voice note of gratitude to somebody that you haven't talked in a while that you just thought of? Flip through your photo album, because our photo albums often tend to be the documentation of our lives. Flip through a couple years, end up on a random photo and go to that person. Hopefully they're not an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend, because you don't want to stir up the mix, and send them a little voice note and just say, I know this sound, even if it sounds weird, right? Hey, I was listening to a podcast and I heard these 2 guys, these 2 crazy dudes talking about how we need to give a little bit of love and gratitude to people in our lives that we maybe even haven't talked to in a little while that deserve it. And I thought of you today. And so I just wanted to send you this voice note that I appreciate you. I remember that time in college that you were there for me. I remember that time that I was going through a difficult time in work. I remember that time that I didn't have anybody to talk to. I remember that time that you just did something nice for me. I remember that time that you just even were a friend to me, whatever it might be, or a solid, loving family member to me. And I just wanted to say thank you. Oh my gosh, you will make their day. How many people receive something like that from somebody that they're not expecting? It completely makes their day, but even better, it'll make your day as well.
It's such a practical take home from this podcast. I mean, that's actually something that, what if everyone listening to this podcast went and did that today? How amazing would that be?
It would have ripple effects. Ripple effects, and it would be something so small, but yet something so big. If you liked the video that you just watched, check out this video over here. I think you're going to love it.
You know, it's one thing to say, listen to your heart or follow your inner guidance and trust it. But a lot of people will say, well, how do I know which voice is the voice of guidance? I'm being told to go and get a dozen donuts. Is that my inner guidance, or is that something else, right? And one distinction that I like to make about that I think is very helpful for me, is your inner guidance, your heart, or your inner inspiration, whatever you want to, the voice of God, the still small voice, whatever you want to call it. It's never going to nudge you in a direction that is going to make you more comfortable, right? Instead, it's going to nudge you in a direction that's going to stretch you. It's going to initiate some level of growth or personal growth or evolution. So, and it's going to excite you at the same time. So not stretch you in the way that a prostate exam stretches you. You know, it's like it excites you. It's like, okay, this is something I've been wanting to do. This idea has been with me for as long as I can remember. It lights my heart up when I think about it, when I imagine myself doing it. But, and then our intellect starts working on us. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I'm not the right color. I'm not the right gender. I'm not the right whatever. And so the heart and the inspiration is trying to move you through that, to help you navigate through those objections that you've created for yourself, which are all really just stories, and to get you on the deep enough into the growth zone so that you can start to take root there and start to kind of feel how expansive you're going to have to get in order to become that person that you've been envisioning for yourself. So in the meditation scene, which I've been in for a long time, the way they would interpret that is that vision that you have is a preview of coming attractions. Like that's where you already exist in that realm. You just have to grow into it. You have to expand into it. And doing the comfortable thing is not going to help you as quickly as doing the uncomfortable thing. So that's one distinction that I think is important, because that can help people when they are split testing which voice do I follow? Because, you're going to follow the wrong voice pretty often when you're first starting out on this path. In order to find your voice, you have to follow a voice in order to find your voice. But once you find your voice, you'll start to recognize it. You'll start to hear it. Just like if you're married or something, you start to develop this sort of language and what do you call it when people share language?
Love languages?
No. Like two people have like this
shared vocabulary.
Yeah, but it's I can't remember the name of it.
It'll come back to us.
Yeah. But you start to develop this mutual language for this relationship that you have with your inner voice, and it becomes more and more distinct and separate from all the other voices. Now, I would also say that meditation and all of those kinds of inner practices are very important for distilling that voice and making it separate from the other voices in there. And I'm not talking about sitting with your eyes closed on a cushion, although that's an efficient way to do it, but you can do journaling, you could do gratitude exercises, you could do what Eckhart Tolle did, go out to a park bench and just be in nature, immerse yourself in nature for an extended period of time, right? All these different ways are ways of connecting with that voice inside.
You're talking about, it takes time to find your voice. I don't know if you've seen this quote. I shared it a while ago on Instagram, but it's from Miles Davis, and I'll paraphrase here, but I'm pretty sure I got it correct. He said, man, sometimes it takes a long time to start sounding like your true self.
I love that.
And I love that because it also just shows the practice that comes in anything that you're doing in life to sound like you. It's like you're always the real you, but sometimes there's layers, like an onion, and you got to peel those layers. And that's one beautiful thing about meditation. We'll chat about that a little bit more, is that you get kind of separate, like, is that my voice or is that my disapproving father's voice? Is that my voice or is that the gym teacher that made me look silly when I was in middle school or whatever, right? You start to separate out that what is me and what is something else.
Yeah. And, we get so impatient with that too. We don't appreciate the practice aspect of it, right? Like anyone, like it took you a while to find your voice when interviewing people. If you write, it takes a while to find your writing voice. If you play sports, it takes a while to find your flow and your rhythm, so you're not having to think about it. But when it comes to awareness of your inner voice, people expect it to happen in a week or, in a day even. And if they don't hear it, they think, oh, I'm not, I'm not that kind of person. I don't do things like that. And it's like, no, it just takes practice. You just have to practice it. And so, but again, no one wants to be necessarily told that. No one certainly wants to be lectured to about it. And that's the intent behind presenting all these stories, where you're just looking at different aspects of inspiration from 1,000 different angles, told through 108 stories, to hopefully inspire people just to, you want to hear a good story? Okay, great. Check out the story, and maybe there's a takeaway from it if you perceive it to be, and if not, it's just a good story. And then maybe you come back to it later and you understand something different about the story. Because some of the stories are my personal stories. Actually, most of them are my personal stories, but then there's some classical stories in there. I did not include the farmer and the horse story, but that is a very classic story that is a very, very powerful one. But there are some other ones in that same genre that I think can be very helpful for people to hear.
And some are just like really beautiful reminders, kind of on the theme of what we've been talking about. I know you left your book in your car, otherwise I would pass you your own book. But here's a little thing about last New Year's Eve. I posted the following on my social media page. I'm going to slide it to you because I know you don't like being read to. So I'm going to let you read to the audience.
So yeah, this one I actually wrote. Again, I send out an email every day since June of 2016.
Yeah, anybody can sign up. The link is in the show notes.
Yeah. So this one I wrote on December 31st, 2019. So just before the pandemic hit. And I said, last New Year's Eve, I posted the following on my social media page. This year is going to be as difficult as last year, no matter what you're intending to create. If you are still defining a good year by manifesting comfort and material success, you'll be setting yourself up for profound disappointment year after year. If you can view the years like college courses and expect them to be challenging and difficult, you'll be better prepared to engage in the process of learning. If you got broken up with or fired this past year, it wasn't a bad year if those experiences helped you develop more valuable tools for loving yourself or for making better life choices or for honing your boundaries. And learning these kinds of lessons is not a pretty or comfortable process, and it sometimes involves dark nights of the soul and lots of tears. But that's how we learn. No one learns anything of value while comfortable. So forget about creating more comfort in this coming year. Instead, cherish the challenges and look forward to your upcoming lessons as a master class in self-love. And judge this year by how many wonderful life lessons you were able to learn. If the year doesn't stretch you, you won't learn anything new, and you're just going to have to repeat the class the following year. 2020, baby.
Well, before we talk about everybody else, let's talk about you. How are you stretched in this last year?
Well, I've been on this sort of nomadic journey since May of 2018, and
give context for that.
So that
a
means
little bit.
That means I used to have a 2-bedroom apartment in Santa Monica, California, and I decided to sell off all of my possessions, no storage room of stuff, just everything had to go. Scrapbooks, journals, yearbooks, old photos, all of it. Art that I've collected over 40 something years. Everything had to go.
It didn't have to go, but you wanted to.
Yeah, that was my plan. Is everything has to
you
go.
You didn't get evicted.
No.
So everybody understands.
No. I evicted myself.
You evicted yourself.
I evicted myself. I gave myself 30 days, and whatever didn't fit inside of my carry-on bag had to go.
Yeah.
So, and then I did that, and
what was the inspiration behind that? Did you wake up one day and say, this is what I feel called to? Was it that inner voice? What was that guidance that pulled you in that direction?
So, this is interesting about my lived experience is, and one of the reasons why I would say I am qualified to write a book like this, where I'm telling these kinds of stories, is I've been doing these things intentionally for a long time. So that was actually the 3rd time in my life that I've gone nomadic. And prior to that May 2018 choice, I had been traveling. I've been on the road for my work, teaching meditation workshops and retreats. I've been on the road for many years, going to London, New York, all these places, Mexico City. And I started to challenge myself to see, okay, I'm just going to carry a carry-on bag, and I'm only going to use what I can fit in the carry-on. So I had been split testing and workshopping these concepts for several months before I made the final decision. The final decision was really just an extension of all the research and development, and that's what I tell people is if you hear my story and you get all inspired and everything, the message isn't to go and get rid of all your stuff tomorrow. It's to find your version of that, because a lot of people will say, well, I'm not that kind of person. I don't do stuff like that. That sounds horrible to me, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. I get it. Find your version of that. What's something that will stretch you? And then reverse engineer what are the baby steps leading up to that, right? Because
just to be clear, like using the words I used earlier, you were feeling excited, but both also like
scared,
a little
nervous,
uncomfortable.
100%,
right?
Yeah.
But the excitement was there. It wasn't like, hey, let's just go bungee jumping for the sake of it. It was, hey, I feel a pull and I'm also a little bit nervous about it. So it was something that in some way you thought might help you create some joy in life and extend it a little bit. Like there was just that pull or that call for your own version of the hero's journey.
Yeah. And the pull sometimes is not enough to overcome the fear, right? Sometimes you have to take an extra step because you know how you can talk yourself out of stuff. And there's another piece in the book, which I think complements this one really well, that you're involved directly in, which is called the discipline illusion, because a friend of mine told me one day, she says, like, you're so disciplined. You don't eat sugar. You work out all the time. You meditate like clockwork. You got these books and stuff that you've written. And I corrected her. I said, well, hold on. I said, I'm no more disciplined than you are, because I could tell she was kind of letting herself off the hook there by using me as this kind of unattainable example. And I said, no, I'm not more disciplined than you. I'm actually very fallible and, very human. And I've done all the mistakes. I've tried to, go too far in one direction and ended up swinging back with a vengeance in the other direction, and all of these things that everybody experiences. But what I have done is I've become really honest about where my shortcomings lie. And so, for instance, with working out, like I know that I have a tendency to talk myself out of going to the gym. But what I do like, what does kind of pull my heart in the right way, is working out in a group format. Like I like working out with my buddies. If I have to drive to the place, then I'm probably not going to go as often. But if I can walk around the corner. So I just found a place. This is back when I was living in LA. I found a place in my neighborhood that I could walk to within a few minutes. It was group workouts, and it was awesome. I would go every single day, and I really got into it. And as far as not eating bad foods or processed foods, I know that if I go to the grocery store hungry, I've had this experiment so many times. I go to the grocery store hungry, I'm going to get chips and, all the stuff that people who are hungry end up coming away with, chocolate and everything. But if I eat a proper meal and then go to the store, then I'm going to only focus on, the premium healthy stuff. And regarding meditation, I struggled through meditation for many years, was very inconsistent. And then finally I decided, hey, I'm going to pay somebody more than I want to teach me how to do this thing that I really want to do for the rest of my life. And sure enough, I went from being a reluctant meditator to becoming an enthusiastic meditator within about a week. And I've been doing it like clockwork every day, right? Because I invested in what I wanted to learn. And then finally, with the book that I wrote, as you know, I was struggling to get this first book published because it was a self-published book. It had been 3.5 something years. And then one day I reached out to you and I said, Dhru, I can't seem to get this thing done. So what I've done is I've created this contract, and I've written you a check, a personal check for, I think it was $4,000 or something like that, which was more than I could afford to lose. And I post-dated it for, I think, 2 or 3 months from that date. And I had you sign it and I signed it. And the contract was, if I do not finish this book by this date, you are obligated to cash this check and use it for whatever you want to use it for. And obviously I wasn't going to let that happen, right? But that was the motivation I needed to finish writing the book. And I think I finished it a week early or something like that. So, that's a story in the book that just kind of reminds people that, look, no one's out here perfect and, and different from you. Everyone is kind of grappling with the same resistance, as our friend Stephen Pressfield calls it. But what we do have control over are the stop gaps that we put in place. And so maybe there are some areas in your life that you can stop gap and that can put you closer in proximity to whatever it is you say you want to do, whatever your version of the nomading thing is.
So I feel like we started it and we explained it. So let's go back and kind of tell it out a little bit. Mm-hmm. I was asking you what stretched you this year. And you gave us the backstory on how you ended up embarking again for your third time on this nomadic adventure. So it's your third time. How could have that been different than stretching you the first and the second time?
What
are the things that came up for you?
I was just saying that as a setup. So, I've been doing things like this for a while. So it actually takes a lot to stretch me these days. But what has stretched me really is not being able to be on the road, because I was really enjoying it. So for me, the supposed instability of being in different places every couple of weeks was challenging. And then at the beginning of 2020, about a month after I wrote that piece, I was in Mexico City, and because I was going to be there for a while, I decided to practice creating a video for social media. And I did it, and it was kind of interesting, and I was like, oh, this is cool, I like it. And then I posted another one the next day, and then I kind of had this idea, let me do this every day for a year. And so I started posting a new video just to get comfortable speaking on camera and coming up with different stories. Now I'm writing a daily story and I'm doing a video story. So I'm having to come up with 2 stories a day, which definitely,
in addition to all the teaching,
in addition
and all
to
the
everything else I'm doing. And then I'm like, I want to do a podcast as well. So 2020 ended up stretching me a lot just in terms of my content creation. But again, it's the stuff that I put myself into, right? So it wasn't a situation where, I was evicted and that stretched me or something like that. Because I'm sure people went through some really crazy stuff. And I intentionally look for those kinds of things though. And I don't wait for the new year to do it. Like a few weeks ago, I gave up coffee, as you know. And just because I knew it would make me a little bit uncomfortable, and it's good to cycle off of those kinds of caffeinated beverages, and but I felt like I was kind of getting a little bit too enmeshed in my routine, where I was just kind of mindlessly consuming things, pastries and coffees and stuff. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't want to feel like the thing is owning me. I want to feel like I have some sense of choice in the matter. And so when I eventually go back to it, then I'll hopefully be able to go back to it in a way that's a little bit more mindful and present than just automatic. And, you look up one day and you've had 4 coffees and you don't know how that happened.
It's really about kicking your own ass.
Yes.
Before the universe can kick your ass.
That's right.
And the universe will always kick your ass at some point in time. Something will happen. A family member will pass away. You'll be struck with some news. You'll have employees quit inside your, life, that's the nature of life.
100%.
Right? Life is going to be that way. But the more that you can, and I get this as a through line through your book, it's like the more that you can accept these little challenges, these small A/B tests, as you talk about, and you kick your own butt, you are developing resilience. And on a cellular level, on a mitochondrial level, we know that to be true. We know that our bodies, when they're not stretched or made uncomfortable through things like extreme cold or hot or intense workouts, which are all ways of trying to replicate what human life was like in our evolutionary history. When that doesn't happen, some of our healthy cells can become what is nicknamed zombie cells. And these zombie cells are basically, they're not so bad that our body goes in and kills them off, but they're not so good that they're healthy cells with flourishing mitochondria. They're kind of in between. They're a little bit too comfortable. And they need to be pushed a little bit. They need to be pushed so our body can say, hey, we need to show up stronger. Let's go and kill all these zombie cells and start creating new ones so that our immune system can be stronger, so that we can show up better for this workout, so that we can break down, our muscle and build it back up. So we know on a cellular level that is so key if we want to have a resilient, thriving body that can handle a lot of different things and have true metabolic flexibility. Well, it just so turns out that the same thing is true emotionally as well. We need to kind of kick our own butt so that we can be ready for whatever life is going to get a chance to throw at us.
Yeah, and it kind of ties back into what we talked about earlier, which is the good day, bad day example. Like, a good day is the day where you're able to adapt to those changes. The coworker quitting and things not going your way for 5 minutes here and there. That stuff adds up if you don't have the capacity to adapt to the change. And so when you do have the capacity, you can still have what would look on paper to be a shitty day. Like if someone, hears about your friend whose side view mirror of the rental car that he didn't have insurance on and got swiped off, and 99% of people will be like, oh my God, are you kidding me? That's horrible, blah, blah, blah. Like no one's going to say, oh, that's great, but why does it have to be a bad thing? Like it could be portal into something else. And that's what I find really interesting. Just to almost automatically reframe these otherwise bad situations into, okay, well, this could be an opportunity. I don't know. I've had so many experiences where it led to something better than I imagined for myself. And what's funny is when I went back to get a new car, because initially I wanted an SUV, but they didn't have any SUVs in the class that I had reserved, and they weren't being very flexible with it. And so they gave me another car, which was a sedan. And I was really nice to the person who was at the desk, because I knew she had a long day and dealing with people like me. And so I wanted to be the different person when I went up there and was like asking her about her day. I said, what's the highlight of your day? You know, did you get any wonderful texts from loved ones or anything like that? And, you know, I could tell it kind of disrupted her normal pattern to have an engagement with someone like that, which is another story in the book, which you can talk about later. But she gave me another sedan, and I started to drive it out, and I let the window down. Something told me let the window down, right? Because the air was on when I got into it. So I let the window down, turned the air off, and I could hear this clicking, 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 clicking. And I said, that sounds like a nail in the tire or something. And I got out, and I saw a nail in the tire. And so I drove it back, put it in the spot. So now I've spent like an hour at this place, right? And again, I have every right to be upset and angry and all this stuff. But I said, you know what? Something is guiding me here. So let me just stay in it for a little longer. And I went back and I told her, hey, I'm so sorry. There was a nail in the tire, you know, isn't that funny? And blah, blah, blah. And she was so apologetic. She said, you know what? I'm going to upgrade you. You want an SUV? Like what kind of car do you want? And I ended up getting a better car than I even imagined initially when I was in there renting the first car, you know, asking for. And that's just kind of how these things can go.
Well,
you know?
You're also a super tall and handsome former model.
All right, you're saying it's not manifestation
teacher.
I like the manifestation
for those
story.
watching on YouTube, let's be real. No, I believe in that. And hey, listen, it doesn't hurt that you're a good-looking fellow as well. That always helps in the matter too. But we all can see these themes in our life if we're willing to look. Mm-hmm. I did a gratitude exercise that I posted on Instagram. And my fiance Yasmin and I have been doing this for a couple years in a row. And before that, I would do it with different friends and people in my life. And it would be, you know, we are so wired for the negativity bias. Our brain has a negativity bias. It was crucial in our survival as human beings when we went from the Sahara to all the different parts of the world that we went to, because life actually overall was very peaceful. It was very peaceful. Food was very abundant, except for in rare situations, maybe in migration, other things like that. And we had a lot of downtime and other things. So when negative things happened, we needed to remember them so that we could avoid them in the future. Anybody who wants to test this out, if you're old enough and you're listening to this podcast, just think about where you were on September 11th, right? Most people know exactly where they were, right? They know what situation they were in. They know who they were talking to. They know
they were wearing.
What they were wearing. Mm-hmm. And for the generation before that, it's like, where were you when JFK was shot, right? For those folks that were around during that time. Our brain is hardwired for remembering negative experiences because it's like, hey, pay attention. We want to make sure this situation doesn't happen again and we don't put ourselves in a place of threat or whatever it might be. Now, because that's the case, and that negativity bias was designed at a time where life was a lot more peaceful and there wasn't a lot of, you know, activity that was going on, we've maintained that. And we've maintained that into the world that we have now, which is we might get passed up from a promotion, or we don't get praise from our boss, or we see something negative on social media that makes us react. We have a lot of light level, non-life threatening, right? Knock on wood for most people. There are still people that are going through life threatening situations. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's a whole other topic, but in most situations, the negativity that a lot of us go through, quote unquote, is not life-threatening stuff. Mm-hmm. It's daily things that we have to deal with. And in America, first world problems, other countries, maybe not as much. So we remember a lot of this stuff. We remember a lot of these things, and we end up in a place where we are constantly paying attention to what went wrong. Everybody knows if you wrote something on social media or you did a project that you really loved or you came on the podcast, you could have 100 positive things that are said about you and then one negative thing, and you only focus on that negative thing. So anyways, the reason that I'm sharing all this is that a lot of time at the end of the year, when people are talking about where do they want to go next year, what do they want to pay attention to, my whole thing is you don't even know what happened this year. You are ultra focused on the negativity and you have hardly any clue about the following 3 questions. So these are the 3 questions that I talked about when it was do this end of year exercise. The first thing is, who's someone that did something for you, right? So I have people go through month to month, January, February, March, April, May. Start in the beginning of the month. It's fun to do with a friend or family member. Say January 2019 or 2020. Who's somebody that went out of their way for you, no matter how small or big, right? Then the next question is, what's something you did for somebody else? No matter how big or small. Did you hold the door open for somebody? Did you hit somebody's mirror, but then you went back and you told them, hey man, this is my fault. I hit your mirror. I want to apologize, and that sort of thing. And the third one was, what's something, no matter how big or small, that was challenging this month for you, because everything is relative, that you did, that even though it was challenging, you did it. And the experience that people have is you go through January, February, March, April, you do that for the entire year and you write down an answer to those 3 questions. You cannot be helped but to be filled with gratitude for how much joy, support, and love and caring and how much resilience you have. And that's something that we tend to forget about as adults. It's not our fault. It's just that our brain is wired that way.
Did you come up with those questions? Those are great questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Those are 3 questions that I came up with when I was sitting in the backyard of a place that I used to live in here in Los Angeles. And I was we had accomplished so much. I had just started this company, the last company that I had, and it was doing incredibly well. We had every celebrity in Hollywood, using our product and talking about it and everything like that on social media. And just that month was a little bit of a challenging month. I went through some tough things and some things didn't work out and maybe we didn't hit some goals. And I remember sitting there thinking, how the hell am I so focused on the fact that that month, which was like December or November, I'm using this month as the excuse to give meaning for the entire year that I went through. But there was so much goodness that happened in this year. There was so much amazing joy, support, appreciation. There's so many ways that I stretch myself. So a lot of times when people say, like Dhru, that's easy for you guys to say, right? You're doing what you love full time. You guys have podcasts, you're a published author, you're a meditation teacher, whatever it might be. That's not me. Well, I would say that if you're still breathing, if you're still paying attention, if you're still kicking, if you still have a chance and you have the gift of life here on earth, somebody's looked after you, somebody's supported you, you've probably done some stuff for some other people. And in small ways, even if you've had really shitty stuff happen to you, you've pushed yourself. You might have just forgotten about it.
Yeah, 100%. I actually have a piece in the book. It's called something about gratitude. I can't remember the exact title, but it's about this. It kind of is, it's a take from the saying, which is kind of a funny saying, is no one's ever calmed down by being told to calm down. And instead of saying to someone, calm down, when you're with someone who's in that sort of space where they're feeling anxious or feeling uncertain or, worried about something, instead of saying to them, calm down, to when the time is right, to ask them, hey, what are you grateful for? What are a few things you're grateful for right now? And if they're not willing to play along or if they're not in that space, then you can initiate it by just saying, well, these are some things I'm grateful for about you, right? Because how often do you get told that from the people who are around you? Like, I'm really grateful about how you show up in life and how generous you are and how, you start listing off these things, and it has a tendency to break down those sort of walls of worry and discontent. And I kind of got inspired to write that from reading something that Wayne Dyer had said, which is, if you're ever having a relationship discussion where things are getting a bit heated, he said, what you want to do is you want to hold the person's hand. He said it's impossible to be mean or vengeful or nasty to someone when you're holding their hand. And it's so true, you know, and it's something that anybody can experiment with who's listening to this. Is if you're in the middle of some communication or miscommunication issue, try holding the person's hand and then going back and revisiting the conversation and just see what comes out. And so I think a lot of these things are kind of inbuilt in the human DNA, right? To kind of invoke compassion and empathy and generosity and abundance of nature when we connect with each other in the right ways. But we're not ever really taught this stuff, so it's like we're all kind of figuring it out on our own. And it's beautiful to be able to present people with a bit of a toolkit for you know, experimenting for themselves and saying, look, not everything may not work. Everything may not work the first time, at least. It may take some repeated practice, but you know, that's what life is a process of refinement. And I'm going through it, and everyone else is going through it as well. There's no one walking around, you know, 100% peaceful all the time, no matter how many meditation courses they've done or, you know, how long they've been monks or whatever. Everyone's dealing with whatever they're dealing with. And that's part of the beauty of life, is that we get to bring our lessons to the table and kind of share them and inspire one another in whatever way, but from our own lived experience.
Hey, YouTube, if you liked this episode, you're going to love this other episode with our friend Eddie Stern on how yoga changes the brain. Check it out.
Everything is consciousness. There is no mind-body. That's an illusion. The world is illusory as well. It's just all consciousness modified as the same thing. This is a